Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It feels like it has been forever since I have posted a video. My computer died and it took about 3 weeks for me to get a new one in. I did run out right away and get a new one, but it was not the best quality and wasn't gonna work for editing videos and everything that I needed it for. So I reached out to the manufacturer of my original computer and they were able to get me a replacement even though it was no longer under warranty. So that was awesome. But it did take about 2 weeks for me to ship the old one out, get the new one back in, and then get everything back up and running. So here we are. I've been working on tons of projects for you guys and I can't wait to share them with you. So with that, let's head straight into the video. Editing Angela here. I totally forgot to mention in my intro that today's video is about repurposing things that I already had at home. So I didn't want to have to go out and buy anything new. I just wanted to repurpose things I already had. So let's get back into it. For this first project, I am taking 6 canvases that I've had on hand, and you can see my son used to just draw one little squiggle on them and then he would be over it. So I wanted to repurpose these into something else. I think I bought these from Michael's and I got them a long time ago. I used to buy these in bulk whenever he loved just drawing on different canvases all the time. So I'm just gonna use my box cutter and cut all of the canvases apart. I do save the canvas parts except the ones that had that writing on them, and in case I can use those in a future project. So once I have all of the canvas taken off, you can see there's like a beveled edge around these. And I don't know if the Dollar Tree ones are like this or not. I want to say they're not. I want to say that they're just flat, but you could use either one for this really. It would still turn out just as nice. And I'm going to glue 3 of these together horizontally. So then I'm going to do 2 groups of 3 horizontal frames. Oh, and these frames were 8 by 10 size. I just used wood glue here because I thought that would hold the best since these are made out of wood. And then I just took some of these really inexpensive, cheap clamps that I have. They're really small. I think I got them from Harbor Freight and they were like less than $1 a piece and they work great for crafting. So once I had my set of 3 frames and I had a second set of 3 frames all glued together, then I took both of those rows and glued those together. So if you couldn't tell already, we are making a window. I was trying to find one of these at either a thrift store or on Facebook Marketplace, but I think they're really popular right now, so everyone is just buying them up, and none of them were really my style anyway, so I figured I would just make one since I had the supplies to do so. So again, I'm just taking my little clamps and I'm holding these together while the glue dries. Then I'm taking some spackling and I wanted to make this look like one seamless piece, so I wanted to fill in all of those gaps where I glued all of the frames together. And I really ended up loving the beveled edge here because it just gives it such a nice added detail, where if they were just the flat frames, it still would have looked nice, but I just really love how this turned out. I also filled in every little hole where all of the like biscuit joints are on the corners of all of these frames. So I definitely used a lot of spackling, took a lot of sanding, but in my opinion, this was well worth it. So once all that dried, I just took my sandpaper, sanded everything down really good, and then I decided to paint this black. And I just took my Waverly chalk paint and ink, and there you go, nice 2 coats of black paint. So then I am taking these holiday picks that I got from Walmart. I got 4 of them. I just broke them all apart and used the pieces that I wanted. I think I used there was only 1 berry piece in all of them, so I did end up using all 4, but for the most part I used 2 main picks. And I didn't want to hot glue these down or anything like that, so I took some floral wire and I just tied the big pine branch that you can see there. I tied that piece down with the floral wire because I did want to have the flexibility to change this out for different seasons. So then once it was tied down with the floral wire, I just took all of the other parts of the pick that I wanted to use and just shoved them in under that wire. So it ended up being nice and tight and held in place really well. So I didn't have any issues when I was moving this around or hanging it up in my home. You can kind of see here, you'll get a close-up in a minute, but just how nice that spackling filled in that whole seam and just made this look like one piece. I really love it. And here's a look at how it turned out. DIY number 2. So for this next one, I'm taking this old shelving unit that I've had. I don't like the way this looks anymore. I haven't had it hanging in my home since for years, but I thought it was just really outdated, and I hated having to clean this because those little cubbies would just collect so much dust and debris, and it was really difficult to clean. So the first thing I wanted to do was remove those dividers and make this one opening, if you will. So there was a little nail in there, and I ended up just pulling that out with my pliers, but these came out really easily with a hammer, just a few taps and they were gone. So then I removed the little face plates and the hooks that are on the bottom, and I gave this a really good sanding. I didn't go like all the way down because this is MDF, so I just gave it like roughed up the surface a bit so that I could paint it, and I did fill in all of those holes with some spackling as well. So the way I'm going to use this, I have this dowel rod, and I got this from Walmart. It's one of the thicker sizes. I think it's the thickest one you can buy. And I cut that down into 5 pieces, and I'm going to use the flat surface here as the top. So I basically flipped it upside down, and then I'm going to put those dowels along the bottom part instead of the top. And I just painted those black, and I'm taking these little rectangular wood pieces that I got from this Dollar Tree variety pack. This is a great deal. You get a lot of good pieces in here. I was going back and forth between wanting to use the circle, which I thought would have looked really great as well since it was slightly larger, or wanting to use the rectangles. And I just thought the rectangle ones gave a bit more modern look, so I went with those. And again, I'm just using my wood glue here, gluing the dowels down to the rectangles right where I want them. So I lined them all up so they would be evenly all in the same spot, basically. And then I go in and I paint those rectangle pieces black as well. So for the shelving unit, I paint this with mineral chalk paint by Waverly. This is the first time I've used this color, and it is so beautiful. It's like a taupey gray color, and I just really love the way that this color turned out. I gave it 2 coats of that paint. So here you can see where I took those shelves out. There's like an indent still, and this is going to be the bottom part of the shelf. So I'm taking those dowel rods and using that as my guide for where I want to place 2 of them. And then I'm going to place the other 3, so like in the center of each side. So 1 in the center of those 2, 1 on the center off to the right between that right dowel rod and then the end of the shelf. I hope that makes sense, but you'll be able to see here in a second. So I place the dowel rods where I want them to be, and then I take a pencil and I just mark where they are so that I can go back in with some sandpaper and rough up that paint a little bit, just so that the glue will stick a little bit better and hold tighter. And I was completely out of the frame for this part whenever I was adding the glue to the dowel rods, but I just used some E6000 and then placed them down where you could see my circle markings there. And then I just took some, what is this, like a soft fabric measuring tape. I'm not sure exactly what they're called, but I just took that and made sure everything was lined up exactly how I wanted it, and then let that sit overnight to dry. And that was it for this piece. I think it turned out looking so much better than it did. You could use this as a jewelry hanger, you could use this for scarves, you could use this for whatever you wanted. I think it was a great flip. DIY number 3, this one is my least favorite because I just think it didn't turn out how I had envisioned it. So I took these Hexagon mirrors that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I had used the frames in another project where I made Hexagon shelves with, and I'll link that video below for you guys. But I wanted to reuse the mirrors in some way. So I glued the mirror part itself onto the cardboard backing that it came with. And I just used my hot glue here. I thought that was fine to hold it, but I just did want something, a little bit more stability on the back of these mirrors. And you can see that I have 9 mirrors placed out here, but I do end up only using 7 of them. And there's one little edge on these mirrors that is a little more rounded than the rest. Most of them are pretty come to a point, and then there's just one side that is a little more rounded. So I made sure those rounded pieces were all facing the same direction. Once I had all those glued down, again, I took these popsicle sticks I had left over from another project, and I just hot glued those down onto the back. These are the really giant popsicle sticks you can find at Walmart, and I wanted to give that a little more reinforcement on the back. And then I'm going to take these dowel rods that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to paint those black. And I use those as like a frame around the mirrors. So I'm gonna cut all of my horizontal ones first, and I just take my X-Acto knife and I score where I need to cut, and then I take my miter shears and I cut each one down to size. I did go in and measure each one individually instead of measuring one and then cutting the rest down, just because Dollar Tree products are not always made equally, so I wanted to make sure they were all going to fit exactly where they were. And then I just sanded down the little edges where I cut off so that they were nice and flat before I glued them down. And I did cut everything down first before I glued any of it. So now that I have all of my horizontal pieces, I'm going to do the same thing with the diagonal pieces, just hold them up, score where I need to cut them, and then cut them down. And once I have everything cut and where I want it, then I hot glued everything down in place. I'm sorry if you can hear a fire alarm going off in the background. This part was a little tedious and this whole project was tedious and time consuming, to be honest, and I really don't love it, so I haven't decided what I'm gonna do with it yet, but you guys can be the judge and let me know what you think. So then after I had everything glued down, I took some dollar store caulking and I put this around the inside of every frame. So I just wanted something to make it a little smoother so you couldn't like see in between all of these because they weren't all even. It didn't look perfect. And this, I do like that I did this method. My problem was that I was too impatient and I didn't wait for it to dry enough before going in and cleaning up the edges and then painting over that white to make it black as well. So if I were to go in and do this again, I would probably take some painter's tape and tape off the inside of the mirrors and then put the caulking on. And then that way, whenever it dried, I could just lift up the tape. It would be a nice clean line under that. And then I could go back in and make any touch-ups that I needed to. This was just, it was a really messy process. My husband came home in the middle of me doing it and I was just like, I'm making a mess. It was everywhere. So after I did put 2 layers on, so you can see here that it is a little thicker, and the second time I realized like I should just put it on, smooth it out, and then let it dry before I try to wipe everything off. So then my husband gave me the idea of taking the razor blade and just, it would scrape right off, which it did. It was great, it was really helpful, but again, I just didn't wait long enough for this to dry. You're supposed to give it at least 2 hours before you would go in and like paint it or touch it up or anything. And I probably gave it maybe 30 minutes. I don't even think I waited that long. So that was definitely my problem here. And what it did was just, there were pieces that were dry, there were pieces that were still wet. So it just made it look really clumpy and not smooth like it should have been. So if I had just taken the time, waited a little bit longer, let it dry, this would have turned out so much better. But then after I had all the edges cleaned up, I just went back in with my black paint and touched up all of the white caulking so that it would match and not just stand out against the mirror. And that was it. I just cleaned everything up. I cleaned the mirror surface up and then hung it up on the wall. And here's how it turned out. So you guys have to let me know. Does it look like a hot mess? I don't know if I show it too closely or not, but it's just not the best in my opinion. But that's it for today's video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.